For customer experience people, I think to expand their scope, we've done some research and show that companies that are really outperforming their peers today, they approach the customer not as a single entity, but increasingly with compliments. So if you think about the experience of your customer who's buying your, I don't know, who's serving coffee at home, right? They use your coffee, but they also use the alarm clock that tells them to wake up, and they use the coffee maker, then they get milk. But their experience of coffee is a combination of experiences that are provided by multiple people. Now, as all those things start becoming more digital, your customer becomes a digital customer. We know what time they went to bed and what time they woke up because of their Apple Watch, what time their alarm went off because the coffee maker goes on, where did they buy the coffee from, and we can start seeing the overall experience. And what that opens up is, and requires, I think, of customer experience professionals, is to start thinking about the full experience you are delivering to your customer as opposed to your small piece in that overall experience. That leads to ecosystems, that leads to partnerships, that leads to APIs, that it expands the scope of what it means to be a customer experience professional.
We know that data-driven companies are outperforming their competition. That is a fact. But connecting all of your data is not easy. And thankfully, Salesforce is here to help. With their data cloud, you can unlock value from your trapped data. So head on over to salesforce.com/products/data to learn more. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Experts of Experience. I'm your host, Lauren Wood. Today, we are going to discuss how customer expectations are changing and how technology enables products and services to be delivered faster and tailored to individual needs. It's a big topic, and it's something that we talk about a lot on this show. And today, I'm joined by two guests, Rob Wolcott and Kaihan Krippendorff, authors of the newly launched book, Proximity: How Coming Breakthroughs in Just-in-Time Transform Business, Society, and Daily Life. So on today's episode, we're going to discuss the concept of proximity and how CX leaders can stay ahead of rapidly changing industries, consumer behavior, and customer experience expectations as a whole. Rob and Kaihan, so wonderful to have you on the show.
Great. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, love your podcast. It's great to be here.
Amazing. Thank you so much. To kick it off, I would love to just give a quick intro for the both of you, because I know you both have deep backgrounds and expertise. So I'll start with Kaihan. Can you please give us a quick blurb on who you are and what you're all about?
Yeah, well, I organize a group of chief strategy officers, and we're calling an organization we call Outthinker Networks. I've also published 5 books. This will be my 6th. My passion's really strategy and innovation. And I also have a podcast. And so that whole world of digital experience delivered through innovative strategies is my passion.
Amazing. And Rob, how about you?
I'm a professor of innovation at Kellogg and Booth, the 2 business schools in Chicago, and I've co-founded a group called the World Innovation Network, or Twin Global, and really happy to be here with you today. I summarize my personal professional purpose as helping people envision the future and finding their places within it. And it couldn't be anything better than your podcast.
Thank you. Let's start off by defining the name of your book, Proximity, because this is really a concept that I know both of you have been studying and thinking about a lot over the years. So one of you, or both of you, please explain to us, what is proximity to you?
The word itself is just a word. It means how close or far you are from something, your proximity to something. And Kaihan and I have said we're going to usurp that word. We're going to usurp the word to mean something very specific about technology, business, the future, in much the same way that disruption has been usurped in a very productive manner to mean something very specific. So what is proximity? Proximity observes the fact that digital technologies of all sorts have one common underlying characteristic that drives change in the economy, and that is they allow us to compress capabilities into smaller and smaller packages and distribute them all over the economy ever closer to each moment in time and space. And we've been seeing this for decades, but now it's exploding everywhere. And as a result of the distributed nature of digital technologies, getting closer to each individual moment, each individual consumer at each moment, digital technologies push the production and provision of value, products, services, experiences, ever closer to the moment of actual demand in time and space. And we don't just mean a little better supply chain management. We literally mean setting us up to procrastinate and do as little as possible until there's an actual customer ready to buy our product, service, or experience. That's proximity.
Great. Could you give us an example, some real world examples of how you've seen this concept of proximity really embedding itself in our world?
There are many, and we can share ones that are emerging, but go back. Amazon has one with proximity, getting what we needed closer to when and where. But when we overlay on that, say 3D printing, it's actually going to allow us to produce things closer to when and where it's needed. So you see dark factories that are robotically enabled, getting smaller, and we can economically put them closer to. We see a lot of car parts, which cost more to ship than to manufacture, getting 3D printed closer to where. So I just want to kind of open it up that what I think is changing is while digital experiences have always been able to be delivered closer to the moment, also now physical experiences or physical elements of the experiences are also going to be able to be delivered closer to.
Lauren, that's a really important point Kaihan made. It's digital, but it's also physical, and they're converging. So 2 quick examples. In December of 2022, I visited the largest vertical farm in operation in the world. It's in Dubai, and it's a partnership between Bustanica and Emirates Airlines. And first of all, I got to say, the produce grown in this place is as good as anything in a French farmer's market. No offense to the French. But the exciting part for me, the next morning, and this is part of the reason they shared this with me, because they knew what Kaihan and I were working on. The next morning, I got on my Emirates Airlines flight back to New York, and the lettuce in my salad was picked in that factory the night before. It was 3 miles from the airport. Now, compare that to the existing model. You grow lettuce in Spain, you harvest it weeks in advance, you put it on a ship, you put it in a warehouse, and then hope it's edible, compared to pick it right before exactly what you need, where and when you need it. And then digital product, that's obvious. We already have proximity of provision on Netflix anytime, anywhere, anything. So it's been happening in digital for a long time. It's coming for physical all over the world.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll just add to that. Miele, the German appliance manufacturer, for example, they have dismantled appliances and from the parts built what looks like an appliance, but is actually a vertical farm that can fit in where your microwave used to be or where your refrigerator used to be. So this is actually a product that's being sold now. So in both of those examples, you are producing closer to when and where.
And it's really feeding this consumer desire of immediacy. Like we are now expecting things to be more immediate because we're seeing, I think there's very much so like an Amazon effect where we think, why can't I get this delivered tomorrow at the latest? And it's something that I hear about a lot in the conversations that I'm having on this show about how leaders need to be looking to other industries, other verticals, and taking the inspiration from how are they really driving this customer experience in a way that is more conducive to what the consumers are wanting. And immediacy is very much a part of that. And I think the digital world has really inspired the physical world in that way. And it's just something that we have to constantly be looking at. What are consumers really wanting? And not only consumers, but also in B2B context. Like we are all experiencing the Amazon effect or the Uber effect of being able to have something right when we want it. And so I think this is so interesting to hear these examples of how companies are producing and they're really thinking about how their supply chain impacts their customer experience, because it really does. Right? If I get something right away, I'm going to like you more.
If I like the thing you sent me, of course. But Lauren, to underscore that, your point about cross-industry exploration, I couldn't agree more. You learn a lot more looking outside your space, and then you can transfer and translate in. By finding something somebody's already doing, they're making money at it. You just need to translate it into your environment. And actually, Kaihan and I designed the book specifically with that objective in mind. So the chapters are how we work, how we eat, how we create and produce, how we prevent and cure, how we power, how we defend. And the last chapter is about the two horizons of the 21st century, which are virtual reality and space, which are both entirely proximate, which we can talk about later if you'd like.
I would love to. Well, do you want to tell us a little bit about it now that we're here?
Yeah, I'll say something about space, Kaihan, and if you want to pick up a little bit about virtual reality. When we were doing research for this, we were reaching out to our friends in various industries and environments and saying, here's our idea. What do you think about it? What are you seeing? And one of the great people I reached out to in the space race is Dorit Denoviel. And Dorit is a professor of space health. Yes, believe it or not, that's a real thing. She's at Baylor University in Texas, and she also runs NASA's grant program for research in space health. And I was explaining this thing about proximity. And she said, Rob, you know what? Everything we're investing in to drive research to help humans be in space is to drive proximity. I didn't know that. We didn't have that word for it. But think about it. If you're on a spaceship for 7 months to Mars, you've only got what's on the spaceship. So it doesn't matter what you need, food, entertainment, healthcare. Let's say you have a medical emergency. You've only got what's on that ship and the other people who are there with you. So all the research and development going on everywhere on the planet right now to get us out to the stars is trying to figure out how to make proximity happen. So that's Horizon 1, space. And then Kaihan, if you want to mention something about virtual reality.
There's so many interesting things happening in virtual reality, but just to pick on space, Japan Airlines has invested in a company that is putting robots in spaces and that allow you to experience those spaces through you being an avatar. It can hear, it can see, and there might be a robot perhaps at the Olympics in Paris. I don't know if it's going to happen, but you could be, and you could say, hey, I want to experience being at the Olympics, and you can do that. And going back to space, they also plan to also put this like in small satellites so we can experience space being there without actually having to pay the millions of dollars it would take you to get your physical body up there.
I was interviewing someone at Niantic and the augmented reality company. And so it's really interesting to hear how they're using that technology to now allow, again, going back to the consumer and the people who are purchasing things, to really enable them to shop by trying things on. We don't need to drive to the store to go and try things on. We actually can just, in theory, put on a headset and see what we look like. Or even, we don't even need a headset as much anymore. There's amazing tools and technologies that will allow us to try on the glasses, and it actually works now. Like, we're getting to a place where it's not like it was a few years ago where it was janky, but now we can actually see, oh, this is what it looks like. I don't have to spend the time to go and pursue the right item. It's right in front of me in this moment. It's immediate.
Or view a house, right? You know, I know you have some real estate experience, but drones and creating 3D experiences, and I can do 50 visits in a day without having to leave and then decide where I want to go. So transmitting that physical experience in a digital form allows it to just be right there in our living room at 3 o'clock in the morning.
So
Completely.
It sounds like we're living into that less janky future.
We already are, yes.
Actually, as you're saying that, because I was working at Compass, the real estate tech company, when COVID hit. And for the real estate industry, this was a huge problem because agents can't show homes. So we had to come up with, what's the virtual version of this? How do we build buyer trust in a property that they're going to purchase sight unseen? And I'm curious to know how you saw, and I'm not sure when you started working on this book, but how did COVID impact this push towards proximity?
It actually was visceral for people. So before COVID, I started thinking about this about 2014. I didn't have a word for it at the time. And then 15, 16, I started talking about it publicly. And it was clear to me that a few people were getting how profoundly different this proximate future was going to be. But most people would hear us and say, oh, they're talking about better supply chain management. And I just slap my forehead and I think, okay, we all love supply chain management, but that's not really what we're talking about. And then two things transformed the ability for people to see this because they felt it. One was COVID. And within a matter of a week, we're all thrust into our home offices and we're doing online meetings. And is it as, quote unquote, as good as being together? No, in some ways. But in other ways, it's actually better. Lauren, you, Kaihan, and I can have this conversation from anywhere, and it's pretty darn high quality. It'll only continue to get more high quality. So that's the first thing that opened people's minds. But the one that really blew them open was ChatGPT. because when that launched in late 2022, we went from a world where if you needed a crappy speech for your daughter's wedding, you started with a blank screen, you worked for hours, you had a crappy speech. Now, you go to ChatGPT or Pi or Claude or something, you type in a prompt, and seconds later, you've got a crappy speech for your daughter's wedding. Now, you've got to edit it. You've got to make sure it's what you really want to say from the heart and all that. But you see how visceral and immediate that experience was. That's proximity in a big way.
Yeah, and what both of those things did was suddenly surge demand for proximate solutions. Because let's say Compass was maybe talking to a tech company that would enable you to provide more virtual showings. You might think a certain percentage of our buyers or our sellers would be interested in that. Now suddenly COVID hits, and now it is everyone, right? So now it makes economical sense to invest in. So that also drove investment in proximate technologies. Yeah.
It went from a nice to have to a must have.
Yep.
Like right now, overnight.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm curious to know, like, how is this proximate revolution, if we can call it that, how is it really reshaping traditional customer experience demands? Like, what are people really asking for now that leaders of customer experiences within their organizations can really take note of?
One thing, and ChatGPT is one example of this, I think it used to be in the past about speed. I'm going to go pick something that I like that was maybe manufactured far away, and there might be a lot of other people who like that, but I want it quickly. But now, as the value gets broken down into components and can be reconfigured in a personalized way, we also expect customized experience. So it's one thing to listen to a podcast, right? But you can also talk with ChatGPT and create your own interactive, customized podcast experience, right? Going back to the cars, I can have a car that has lights of a certain color that have my name on the bumper, and I can customize it. So it's raising the expectations of customization as well. And I forget what the name of it, but there's a Coca-Cola vending machine that you've probably seen it in movie theaters, and you can press a few buttons and you can get 100 different, you can get your diet, caffeine-free, cherry, vanilla, Coke,
the
lemon,
freestyle
machine, right?
Yeah.
And what it does is, that's been around for a while, but it basically, the value of mixing syrup with soda is not done in a bottling plant. It's done at the moment of demand. And so that not only reduces the cost because you're not shipping bottles, you're shipping soda and then a little bits of syrup, so it's more economical, but it also, because you're now taking value and putting it into smaller components, it allows you to customize more. So now that it raises the expectation of customization.
Yeah, Lauren, I'm not sure if you noticed it in the book, but there's a story of Dr. Jeffrey Ling, who, with DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, he was a medical doctor for the Army, they developed a system to produce pharmaceutical drugs on demand. And I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but essentially it's like a refrigerator-sized piece of equipment that has all the basic components in. And if you need 300 doses of ciprofloxacin, it produces it on demand right there from scratch. Or if you need 1,000 doses of atropine, it can make hundreds of different kinds of generic drugs. And this has already been confirmed by the FDA that they come out exactly like they do from the pharmacy. And it's already being rolled out a little bit in military, but there's a commercial application right now in Tupelo, Mississippi. And it's serving a chronically underserved community with chronic generic drug shortages for many years. And since they switched it on, they're focusing on 6 injectables first, just to test it to make sure it's right. Since they switched it on in January, this hospital system in Tupelo, Mississippi has had 0 stockouts of any of those injectables for the first time in their history. So this is proximity. This is bringing the production close to the moment of demand. So you only produce what exactly you need. And it's the same underlying technology as the Coca-Cola freestyle machine at the Fuddruckers.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting. And it's something I'm just thinking about, like all the different applications of this, and also the added benefit of less waste too. It's,
yes,
I would assume, even though the technology, investing in that technology is more expensive, if we think about the Coca-Cola freestyle machine, they don't have, I really like the cherry Coke. My partner really doesn't like the cherry Coke. I'm sure some people don't like the cherry Coke, and maybe there's always cherry Coke left over. And instead of throwing it out, it's just, it's there ready to be produced, so it
Right, and
drives less waste.
38% of the food that we produce is wasted.
And 30% of the apparel worldwide.
So what if you could produce the food on demand? What if you didn't pick the tomato until someone walked into the store and wanted the tomato? It wouldn't go bad the next day, or you didn't produce the shirt that no one's going to buy, but you wait until. So there are both social and economic drivers of driving us towards proximity.
Amazing. I just have to share this stat. I worked in the food waste space in my last role at Too Good To Go, and I just want to say that 10% of greenhouse gas emissions come from food waste, from the whole system, but the inefficiencies in that system. Because when you pick a tomato in Mexico and then you have to ship it to Idaho, that's a long time. And that not all the tomatoes get put on the shelves, and then not all the tomatoes get picked up off the shelves, and then the tomatoes go to people's homes, because in America especially, we go shopping once a week, once every 2 weeks. Those things sit in the fridge forever, and then they go bad and we throw them out. And if we can create more proximity with our food system, we can really solve that problem. So I'm seeing all the benefits here.
Lauren, you've hit on a really profound point. If we could stay on food for a minute, because we all like food.
Yeah, please.
Mm-hmm. So in the book, we talk a bit about cultured meat. Now, cultured meats are not really ready for prime time. They can do them. I've actually tried some cultured meat at LF Farms in Tel Aviv, and it was good, but it's very expensive to produce. But that cost of production is dropping dramatically and quickly. So we don't know if it's 2 years from now or 10 years from now, this will become a real thing. Well, what does this mean? Cultured meat is not a meat substitute. It's actual meat fibers, actual muscle tissue that is grown in a lab situation with no living animals involved at all. So you eliminate all the ethical issues. You eliminate most of the environmental impact. There's no methane emission. The water requirements for cultured meat are something like 99% lower than the way we raise meat today. So talk about sustainability impact. And the really exciting thing from a proximity perspective is I'm sitting in a bedroom in my home right now. That's what this studio is. And you could conceivably create a cultured meat production facility right here. You need to get some permits from the city of Ridgewood, New Jersey. But my point is, a company can create these instantiations of meat production in an urban area, in a small footprint, and serve only what meat products are desired, needed in that local proximity, as opposed to buying thousands of acres, raising cattle, sending them to slaughterhouses. And it's extraordinary. There's no comparison in terms of supply chain and sustainability between these two models. It's coming in a big way.
Wow. I'm just thinking, like, how long does it take to create like a steak or chicken nuggets or whatever?
It takes a lot less time than the 18 months it takes to raise a cow.
That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. So your cycle time's a lot better. Now, the big issues right now are not so much the tissue, but the texture, the feel, the tension on the teeth. But we'll figure it out. I don't know if it's a year or 10 years, but it'll be figured out. And by the way, LF Farms in Israel, they're working with some of the celebrity chefs in Tel Aviv to define their own special type of beef or type of meat, that each of those celebrity chefs will have the ownership of that special configuration of meat. And then once they get ultimately to market, they'll be the only ones allowed to use that specific kind of meat. So talk about customization.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So it's like, it's customization, it's speed, it's environmental impact. It's...
Wagyu all over the world.
Oh my God. I can't wait for that. That's so good. Wow. So this is happening in so many different ways. And I love that you found this through line. It's something I think about it, but I haven't really underscored it in the way that you have. Kaihan, you have something to say.
Yeah, one thing I think that's for customer experience people, I think to expand their scope is we've done some research and show that companies that are really outperforming their peers today, they approach the customer not as a single entity, but increasingly with complements. So if you think about the experience of your customer who's buying your, who's serving your coffee at home, right? They use your coffee, but they also use the alarm clock that tells them to wake up, and they use the coffee maker, then they get milk, right? But their experience of coffee is a combination of experiences that are provided by multiple people, right? Now, as all those things start becoming more digital, your customer becomes a digital customer. We know what time they went to bed and what time they woke up because of their Apple Watch, what time their alarm went off because the coffee maker goes on, where did they buy the coffee from, and we can start seeing the overall experience. And what that opens up is, and requires, I think, of customer experience professionals, is to start thinking about the full experience you are delivering to your customer as opposed to your small piece in that overall experience. That leads to ecosystems, that leads to partnerships, that leads to APIs, that it really changes the scope, expands the scope of what it means to be a customer experience professional.
Oh, completely. How can we boost the experience of the core product that we have?
Yes.
How can we bring people into the ecosystem or the vision that we have for how they're actually going to experience this thing?
Right. Yeah, and go down to their job to be done, and you are helping them get one part of their job done, but you can start elevating up to the overall job to be done.
As I'm sure you are aware, companies today have more customer data than ever, which is great. But then how do you actually use all of that data at scale? Salesforce's Data Cloud can help by giving teams a single source of truth for every customer. Ready to get started? Work with leading Salesforce experts from professional services. Visit salesforce.com/products/data to learn more.
Lauren's original question about this seems to clarify things. You're really good at saying how this clarifies things. So walk us through that.
So, yeah, I think there's when things change, what stops us from acting on them is usually putting the pieces together. Probably a lot of your listeners are familiar with lean or agile or scrum approaches, right? Those come from a framework called Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act, the OODA loop, which is developed by a former military pilot and trainer called John Boyd. And he would say, what prevents a fighter pilot from making sense of reality and reacting quickly is they observe the environment, but they consider it as different pieces. So he would do this exercise and say, take elements, take the handlebars from a bicycle, take the skis from a ski scene, and take the treads off a tank. We think of them as three different things, but when we put them together, if you can see the snowmobile that makes, suddenly you know what the next thing is. You're on the snowmobile, you're riding off in the sunset while other people are trying to figure out what's going on. So if we take AI, blockchain, 3D printing, digital products, geopolitical uncertainty, digitization, APIs, we take all of that, what I find is that proximity is the snowmobile. Suddenly they don't look like individual things. They look at one thing, and it allows strategists to then take the next action.
And I'll give you an example, Lauren, about how this becomes predictive as well. We can predict where things are going to go. Remember that proximity is based on the notion that digital allows us to compress capabilities in smaller and smaller packages. So we know we're going to see more and more of that, and then it's going to be distributed all over the place. So the book manuscript was done in like January, all done, locked and loaded, ready to go. And we talk about large language models, not a shocker. Everybody's talking about LLMs. We also talk about small language models. And this is not a generally known thing, but people have been working on those for a while. And the idea of a small language model is compressing the large language model capabilities. You lose some of the clarity of the large language model, but you can, for certain purposes, it's actually a lot more effective, right? So small language model for lots of different applications. So you know that's where it's going. What did Apple announce just recently? They announced that they were going to develop and implement efficient language models across all of their mobile devices.
In their devices.
In their devices. So, Apple announced that they were going to roll out efficient language models, ELMs, across all their devices. Now, what is the difference between a small language model and an efficient language model?
That was exactly my question.
Very good. Very good question. Well, absolutely nothing. Apple just likes to come up with their own name for stuff. Okay, so that's what it is. But the point is, you could see the large language model that run on huge servers in Iceland and way out in the cloud somewhere. And by the way, you access it anywhere, so you don't care where it's located. But Apple says correctly, you know what, let's compress that capability and get it onto the smartphone. So there are certain things that they'll be able to do, even if they're disconnected from the network. And that's where it's going. We can predict this stuff. It's going in that direction.
Wow. Talk about proximity. just building it right into your device, which is actually counter to what we've been doing the past couple of decades, where we went from downloading something onto your desktop so that you can use it. Everything's been in the cloud. Now it's coming full circle. Where
it's a dance. It's a dance between the cloud and edge,
Yeah.
And by the way, they both provide proximity, because proximity is not about where the numbers are being crunched at all. It's always about the value, the locus of value. Where is the value demanded and where is it provided, created and provided? So I don't care that it's on a server somewhere in the cloud. It's proximate because it's serving Lauren exactly where and when she needs it.
Yeah, if I just build on that a little bit, distributed computing overlaid with distributed energy, overlaid with distributed blockchain, which allows us to then produce energy closer to where it's needed, make payments between people who are producing it to power distributed computing. These distributed models then layer on top of each other, and they open up exponentially, far more rapidly than they have been, the possibility of delivering proximity.
And the key to distributed agriculture is distributed power.
Yes.
Having sustainable, economical, reliable power distributed all over the place is the key to distributed agriculture. And then when you have proximate agriculture, you solve food deserts. You provide high quality food, produce, et cetera, to wherever and whenever people need them. So these all nest, they all relate to each other.
I think I just want to underscore what you said, because it clicked for me, is like where and when we need it. And really thinking about the whole picture, where and when we need it. It's not just, I need these pants today, right now. It's also like, where are the pants being made? And do I get a say in that? And can it happen quickly? It's like, it's
or
not
do I
just,
want them
I'm going to
customized?
wait. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's taking it another step.
Yeah, you probably have seen this, but Levi Strauss has been able to laser finish jeans for some time now. And they were doing it in their future stores before COVID that shut it down. I don't know what the status of it is right now, but it's proven it works. They take the standard pant, and as a consumer, you could go in and say, I want a rip here and stonewash look there, and I want a picture of my kids on my butt. Okay? So they throw it in the laser machine. 90 seconds later, you've got a picture of your kids on your butt. I don't care how good your demand planning team is at your company. You're not going to figure out how many pictures of Rob Wolcott's kids on his butt pants to stack for a year from now. That's entirely impossible.
At least two.
Yeah, at least two pairs.
So the thing that I'm thinking about here is the real barrier to proximity. To me, it sounds like it's technology. It's having the tech that enables us to produce things where and when we need it. And how is that changing? And am I right there?
That is, if you take every product and you divide it between digital and physical, there is a physical component that has been difficult to economically deliver approximately, but technologies are enabling it to be done increasingly so.
Yeah, technology is to an extent a constraint, but look how fast it's moving and it's changing. Yes. Generative AI is just one example of how quickly this stuff is moving. So I think given that, and I think we all agree it's going to continue to move. So I think given that, the real constraint is our imagination. The real constraint is our ability to think about the models within which our companies currently operate, the ecosystems within which we operate, and standing back from them and doing the stuff that Kaihan talks about when he talks about outthinking the competition. How do you stand back from the standard model and envision how it can transform? Because everybody can look at a new technology and say, what can this allow us to do better that we already do? And that's great, but that's not enough. The big question is, what can this do that we could never have done before? And that's where breakthroughs come from.
Yeah, build on that. Let's take Salesforce, right? Salesforce for years was talking about not software because it was trying to convince people that it's possible to do something without having it downloaded and run on your machine or in your... But once we introduced someone came up with the term cloud, suddenly there was a metaphorical vessel that allowed us to adopt a different way of thinking. And then suddenly that opened the floodgates, right? So I think that there is a constraint of technology, but we are just scratching the surface. If all technological advances stop now, we still are just realizing a small portion of what is already currently possible because of the old mindset.
And by the way, Lauren, don't we sound smart? Metaphysical vessel or metaphorical vessel. That sounds really darn smart, doesn't it?
I love it. Do you have any recommendations for our listeners in how to pull back and think differently? Because it can be so hard when we have the way that we are working and we have an idea of this is how the world works and this is how our product works and this is what our company does. But how do we actually pull back and actually think about all these possibilities that maybe we can't even imagine yet? How can people get into that headspace?
I have one, and Kaihan's been thinking a lot about this, actually facilitated a number of workshops with companies to think through proximity strategy. But where we always like to start is with the customer. And by the way, you have to think about the customer's customer as well, depending on where you are in the world. But start with the customer and ask yourself that. We all think we know what the customer wants, but we also should recognize that that changes over time. Their expectations are rising every day because of all the things we're talking about. So start with that customer and say, really challenge yourself to discover what might that customer want if they could have anything at all? What would that customer want if they could have anything, anywhere, anytime? And don't let reality get in the way when you have this initial exploratory conversation. We'll reintroduce reality later. Don't worry about that. This is an exercise. What would that customer want related to you if they could have anything, anywhere, anytime? And that's where this thinking starts.
Dreaming big.
And I think dreaming big, and it's It's easier to dream big when you get people to just zoom out 10 years from now and create many instances of time between now and then it liberates people from their concurrent constraints, and then say envision what we call P equals 0. And customer experience professionals will know how to envision the emergence of the need, that moment where the need emerges, and then just say, what would it look like if the need was identified and the value was created? The banana was grown in 30 seconds, right there in the kitchen. It was mashed and turned into whatever and delivered, right? Everything that's a gap between now and then is an opportunity to innovate. You look at what technologies are existing that could address those barriers. And from that, you could kind of triangulate on a few opportunities. The good news is it doesn't take much. You don't have to get there. You invested in Domino's Pizza 15 years ago, you'd have more money at you now than if you had invested in Google, right? A pizza company, right? All they did was give people the experience of getting the pizza earlier, right? You could see it being made, or it was being made, know it's being quality checked, and so that allowed them to generate more value than Google's investment in technologies.
At least over that 15-year period.
Over that period of time.
Fun fact, I had no idea. Domino's.
But a small step, right? A small step. You say customers want it fast, right? So even a small advantage can give you huge value. So you don't have to solve all of it.
And by the way, Lauren, in the appendix of the book, we have proximity strategy workbook. And you don't even need us there, really. You could take this workbook and go through the questions and fill in the blanks and discover what proximity means in your environment. So there are lots of tools to figure this out. But now you know where the future is going to go. It's going to start to produce and provide ever closer to the moment of demand. And the people who are able to do it best are the ones that are going to win.
Completely. So 1, workbook. Thank you for including that in the book. That's so helpful. And then 2, I think it's really important for everyone to think about having someone facilitate these conversations, because it can be really difficult to pull out on your own. As a facilitator myself, it's my greatest joy in life to help people, let's get out of that normal way of thinking and being for a minute and really enter into a new world of what is possible. And it's a brain exercise and it's not easy. And so having someone guide you through that is incredibly helpful. So it's great to know, Kaihan, that you're supporting companies in doing that thinking. I have a couple last questions.
Well, actually, Lauren, not only is Kaihan supporting companies to do that, and I do as well, Kaihan is building a whole cadre of coaches and facilitators to become trained to use this methodology. And I'm excited to see that take off because as an author, as a professor, as a researcher, as a human, when you see what you're doing having a modest impact in the world, it's a really nice thing.
I think this is a big impact, just saying, because we're in the middle, or I want to say on the cusp, in the beginning stages of really massive change because of the impact of AI and the speed at which things are changing. We are all of a sudden, let's say we have been in a horse-drawn carriage and now we're in a race car, and we jumped from the slow way to like the really, really fast way. And it's time to buckle up. It's happening really quickly. I have just a curious question for you. I'm really curious to know, how did you come about this topic? What inspired you to write this book?
I can tell you the exact moment when this started. I didn't say, oh, I'm going to write a book, but the moment when the journey started. I was at a tech conference in 2014. I honestly don't remember which one, but you probably go to a lot of tech conferences. After a while, they all blend together, right? And there was this period for maybe a decade around that time. Mercifully, people don't do this anymore. But there was a period for about a decade where every speaker at tech conferences would have two obligatory slides. One was Moore's Law. That slide that had the diagonal that goes up to the right, and it's doubling. And they would stand up there and say, every 18 months, processor, and they're talking to a tech audience. And I'm thinking, do you really have to tell us that again? It's a profound, important concept. But after the 74th time, I got it, okay? And then the next slide this guy had, again, I'm not going to name any names. The next slide this guy had was, and by the year 2030, 1 trillion devices will be connected. And you're thinking, okay, I think we know that. So I was stewing inside myself and trying to be polite, not letting on how annoyed I was. And I thought, all this digital stuff is going to change the world. There must be some common underlying dynamic or characteristic of digital that, if we could discern it, could give us foresight as to where the world's going. And so that was the genesis of this question. What is fundamentally different about digital? And that led quickly to, oh, what's different is, compared to the industrial age, is you can take these capabilities and smush them down into really small packages and distribute them all over the place. And that eventually became proximity.
Thank you for all those Moore's Laws slides. They eventually got you to come up with a really great idea.
And it only took 74 of them, Rob.
It only took 74 Moore's Law slides.
Sometimes the best ideas come out of frustration.
Yes, true. True.
So I have two last questions for you, and I'm going to ask them to both of you, and I'm going to change one of them. So typically I always ask, what is a recent experience that you've had with a brand that left you really impressed in the context of customer experiences? But I want to ask something a little bit different. What's a recent experience that you've had with a company that has gotten proximity really well, that delivered something to you with that concept of proximity really present?
This is fairly simple. I moved down to Miami a year and a half ago, and we had an organization, a company that was our moving company. And when I needed to get a mirror hung or something unpacked, I would call someone who would call someone who would call someone. And then 2 days later, someone would come, and then they would check whether they had approval to do this or whatever. And it was just so frustrating. And so I opened up TaskRabbit, and that afternoon, someone came, and before long, we were just doing everything on TaskRabbit. We just sent a bill, right? That is, I think, a good example of proximity to talent.
Yeah,
Totally.
I love that. I love that. For me, and we actually talk about this in the book, December 2022, I was in Dubai, and I was meeting with technology leadership at Emirates Airlines and telling them about proximity. And one of the execs said, you know what, everything we're investing in is to drive proximity, and I didn't know that, but now I have a word for it. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. And at the same time, I also visited Bustanica, the largest vertical farming operation anywhere in the world, and the lettuce and all. And when I got on that flight the next morning on Emirates and had that salad, and I knew exactly where it came from the night before, that I felt something, because it felt like I was experiencing the future in that salad. Tasting the future in the salad. So I aspire for everyone in the world to taste the future in their salad.
I'm a big vertical farming fan. I think it's something, we should not have food deserts it doesn't make sense.
Once you have distributed, renewable, sustainable power, we'll have food grown all over the place. That's the key.
Yeah, completely. Amazing. So one last question for you both. What is one piece of advice that you think every customer experience leader should hear?
I'd say never let yourself assume you actually know what the customer wants. Even if you're hitting on all cylinders, always challenge yourself to believe that you can do better, that you can find more, and that your customers' desires change.
Mm-hmm. I posted about this on LinkedIn. Were you like looking at my LinkedIn the other day, Rob?
No.
Literally,
no.
You are like we're on the same page here.
You're absolutely right. We assume way too much.
Yeah. We can't assume. We need to ask. We need to find out what is it that they actually want. And I think it's actually important going back to the facilitating piece. And as we think about workshops and we dream about what is it that our customers want, I facilitate a lot of customer journey mapping workshops, and we can go through that process, but then we need to go and validate our assumptions.
And not only ask though, I mean, you're right. The consumer journey mapping, ethnographic research, also become the customer to the extent you can actually become the customer. And we'll discover things that they can't even tell you because they don't know it's a problem, or they don't know that they have this desire because they didn't even know it was possible.
Mm-hmm. Completely. Kaihan, how about you?
Yeah, I guess I would go back to something I mentioned before, is when you do that customer journey map, remember you are just like one thread in their journey. There's something they came to before, there's something they went to after, there are other things they're accessing, and really think about the complete journey and avoid myopically focusing on your strand on that journey.
Completely. I think that's such great advice. Thank you so much for coming on this show. I've learned so much. I'm sure our listeners have as well. Where can folks find you to learn more about your book and your work?
Certainly proximitybook.net, and then I'm also at kaihan.net.
Awesome.
And proximitybook.net. Did we already say that? And I am always on LinkedIn. I'm always available on LinkedIn. If you reach out to me, mention that we met through Experts of Experience, and then I'll have context.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. I hope you have a beautiful day. We'll talk soon.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren.